Welcome to this episode of the Good Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Good. In today's episode, I'm joined by Graeme Codrington, best-selling author, futurist, and consultant working across multiple industries and sectors, blending cutting-edge research and thought-leading insights to help organizations and individuals make better decisions. In this episode, we have an insightful conversation that will transform how you approach decision-making. We're diving into powerful, proven tools that will help you get to the root of problems and think through problems from multiple perspectives. We also explore how AI can be a game changer in making smarter, faster decisions. Plus, we're sharing practical tips to boost your mental agility and make you a more adaptable, sharp decision maker in today's fast-paced world. So if you want to make better decisions faster, this episode is for you, so let's jump in. Welcome to the Good Leadership Podcast, where we engage with esteemed thought leaders and explore research-backed strategies and techniques that empower leaders at every level to achieve meaningful results that drive lasting change. Let's talk about how we can foster a culture of continuous learning and improving our decision-making through some tools. And you have some great tools. Let's start with the 5 why approach that I think was first started by Toyota in their manufacturing systems to getting a deeper analysis of what the underlying issues are so that you can make a better decision.
Well, I know you've got a list of some of the tools that I've got. I love that you chose the 5 whys. It's one of my favorites. And the 5 whys is about when you are dealing with an issue that doesn't have a doesn't have a system one, fast brain answer, right? And you realize that there's a deeper problem. Now, you might not realize that initially. You might try and solve the problem with your first instinct, and you'll have a sense that you didn't solve it when you're sitting with your team and you said, but hey, guys, didn't we deal with this a few weeks ago? Why is this back on the desk? Why is this back in the room? So then you'll know it's sort of a problem that keeps sneaking back at you. Or it's a problem where you look around the room and you realize, do you know what? We're not even agreeing about what the problem is, let alone the solution. Those are 2 very strong indicators that the 5 why technique should be pulled out. And what it is to say, well, let's start with the definition of the problem. Tell us what the problem is. And then we ask why. Why is this problem there? Somebody will give you an answer. And then when they give you an answer, you take their answer and you ask, but why is that an issue? And you ask it again and you ask it again. And by the time, it is remarkable. It sounds too simple. It sounds like we're giving ourselves permission to be 3-year-olds. Why? It's not quite as that. The key is the dig deeper. So it's not just another why randomly, but you gave me an answer. Now I'm asking why about your answer. And it is remarkable, Charles, that within 4, and I've never had to go more than 5 whys, you're finding there's no more why. My why question now doesn't make sense. We've reached the underlying cause, the foundation of the problem. Now, it still might be a very big and difficult problem to solve, but at least you've found the real problem. And Charles, the remarkable thing about this is I find this technique as useful when I'm dealing with relationships with my family. My wife and I might be rubbing up against each other the wrong way for a few days, and we finally get a chance to sit down on a Friday evening and say, you've been irritating me the whole week. Let's sort this out. So why? Why are you irritated? Well, why does that irritate you? Well, why did you do that? Why? Oh, okay, I see what's going on here. And it's wonderful because it takes the pressure off that first level response, and you suddenly realize we're on the same team here looking for an underlying cause. And then it still might be difficult to deal with, but at least you're dealing with the root cause. So it's wonderful in personal relationships. I find it incredibly useful. And if I can just throw in another concept, it's part of the way in which your team can feel psychological safety to question the boss. Because if you've given your team permission to say the 5 whys technique is available. It's available to us as a team. And it's almost like you give people a trump card in the team meeting, and somebody can just say, you know what? We haven't dealt with this issue properly. I want to play the 5 whys. And the team goes, okay, let's do it. And you make it almost a game. And you play the 5 whys. One person becomes the quiz master, and you dig down and you dig down, and you know what you're trying to do. And if it's an issue that the 5 whys can help you get to a foundation, everybody's going to be happy at the end. So absolutely, if somebody listening to this has never heard of the 5 whys before, look it up. There's lovely examples. And Charles, just by the way, I know this isn't the topic that we're talking about, but related, for some reason, the chat GPTs and all the others, the Bings and Bards and Groks and Copilots and all the rest, those large language models, for some reason, they're very good at 5 whys. So even if your team won't play it with you, you can go into a chat GPT system. And it's obviously been used so many times in so many circumstances that it's part of the large language model. But generative AI is pretty good at saying, help me, you be the quiz master, you be the question master, here's the issue we're dealing with, and let's go one why at a time, do 5 whys on me, and you can get the artificial intelligence to help you get down to the root cause.
Well, I'm so happy you brought that up because technology can be leveraged with all these decision-making tools, and it should be. With the way we have ChatGPT 4.0, the new ones coming out, the new ones with Apple, with Microsoft, so many tools, but they're great in helping you with these tools to get better at your decision-making, even questioning your decisions or your reasoning and using the biases that it has at its so it doesn't hallucinate. Maybe you can even put in a document of common biases, and it can even tell you those. What I find really kind of profound when I did the 5 why technique is how many people really don't know what the root cause of the problem is. Even when you're talking to others, when you're trying to get at the emotional core of a difficult encounter with someone else, you really want to get to that emotional core. And social media companies are excellent at this. And they've drilled down. They have a slew of researchers, behavioral scientists that really identify that emotional core of why they want to come to their platform. But many of us don't get to that core. So when we think, here's the issue of why you and I are not getting along, that may not be the issue because we really haven't unpacked it to the level that we need to get a deeper understanding and improve that relationship.
Charles, you're so right that these generative AI models are actually quite good at being a sparring partner for thinking. I have my own views. This is probably a topic for another conversation someday. I don't think we've got artificial intelligence yet. And Sam Altman, if he listens to the show, is welcome to contact me, and I'll tell him face to his face. The reason I say that is that these large language models are based on building an engine on billions of pages of documents of existing human knowledge. So I'm not saying they're not powerful, but they basically a very, very powerful encyclopedia with probability prediction of what it thinks you'd like to know, which means that if we're asking it a question about something that people in the past have known, we can get a good answer. It's not good at coming up with new ideas and creative ideas. If you're asking ChatGPT who's going to win the Super Bowl next year, I mean, it's got as good an answer as your Uncle Fred has got. And I wouldn't be placing any bets or any money on the basis of it trying to predict or be creative. But, and this is an interesting point, Charles, almost a sadness for me. As human beings, we should know this stuff about biases and thinking tools and critical decision. It should be taught at school. You shouldn't be allowed to graduate from college if you don't know this. And it should be standard conversation at the dinner table and in our boardrooms that we can point out, oh, you've just had, I'm just going to mention a few we haven't met. Oh, that's a bit of a framing issue. Oh, that's a bit of a halo effect, isn't it? We should know this language, but we don't. ChatGPT does, and all the others, because lots of psychologists and organizational behavioral specialists have written about this. So ChatGPT can help you go to it and say, here's the problem I've got. Here's what I think I should do about it. Please test my assumptions using the top 10 cognitive biases and ask me good questions. And again, if it's a big enough decision that you're making in your life, it's worth the half an hour, isn't it? To just get ChatGPT to give you 10 really great questions based on these common biases. And you'll be amazed at what the technology tools can do to help us improve our thinking.
One is that real-time feedback that everyone needs, and it's in your pocket, it's available anytime, and it brings awareness to issues that you were not aware of. And like you said, with those, Google Notebook LM, it's a closed loop system. So you can put in documents with these biases. So it's not going to hallucinate. It's going to pull information and it's going to test your thinking, your assumptions, and your beliefs to make sure that you're not falling into these. Because I find with many people, it's really hard to get that honest feedback and it's not in a timely manner either. So I think that's one way you can leverage technology, not only to uncover biases and be more aware of those, but with these decision making tools like the 5 Why techniques, or this next one, the 6 thinking hats, which I think is a great method. It's an older type tool, but I think it's still equally valid today. And it's a method where you have these 6 metaphorical hats, right? Each representing a different style of thinking, once again, to improve your decision making.
So let's give credit where it's due. This goes back probably to the father, the grandfather of these days of critical thinking, Edward de Bono. And he came up with this concept. Other people have used it in different ways. The concept is there are 6 different, maybe these days, let's call them lenses or glasses rather than hats. That we don't wear hats anymore. That's how old the model is. But he used colors, and it's very useful. So the first thing you need to do is look through the dark lenses. He called it the black hat. What could go wrong? What are the dark storm clouds of danger in the decision you're making? Then you look at the yellow hat, which is the opposite, right? It's the sunshine. What could go right? What's the upside of the decision you're making? Then you bring the white hat. That is for pieces of paper. It's data. It's information. Don't bring me any emotions, just show me the facts. Then you want the red side. That's for your beating heart and the blood and everything. So forget the facts. I don't care what the facts are. What are your emotions? What do you feel about this decision? Then the green hat or the green lenses, that's for nature and growth, and that's what are the craziest ideas? What are the creative ideas that you can think of? What's the stuff nobody else has thought of around this decision? Give yourself just permission to just go a bit absurd. And then the final hat is what the blue hat, and that's kind of the chairman of the meeting. And the blue hat is almost standing back from the other hats that you're using and just saying, you know what? We haven't heard from the black hat in a while. Or, you know what, we've had a lot of emotion for the last few minutes. Let's just shut the red hat down for a few minutes and let the other hats talk. And if you're using it as a technique in your family or in your team, there are 2 ways to use it. The one is you move as a group from sort of hat to hat or lens to lens. So you all say, right, and somebody has the blue hat on at all times, and they say, right, we've done enough red hat, now let's go to the green hat, for example. The other way to do it is you allocate each member of your team a hat, and that's the only contribution they're allowed to make to the conversation. They have to represent the lens or the hat that they're wearing. And my favorite thing to do is to give those to the opposite personalities. The grumpy old sod in your team. Give them the yellow hat and say, you've got to only be upbeat today. And they're grumpy about having to be upbeat. But then it's interesting. You force their brain patterns to change. That's the point of the tool, is that when you force your brain patterns into a certain style of thinking, it might not be your natural style of thinking. It's amazing what happens. So yeah, one of my favorites, 6 thinking hats.
And it's something, once again, you can use with ChatGPT or generative AI just to have them go through those different framing. It's about a framing effect and looking at it from a different perspective, which I think is so valuable for leaders, because all leaders are making decisions in uncertainty or in uncertain times. And there's a famous, I wouldn't say quote, but a speech by Donald Rumsfeld. He's a U.S. political person. Whether you're on one side or the other, it doesn't really matter. I think he provides a great framework on identifying those four types of decisions you have to make in four different areas of uncertainty. And it sounds kind of confusing. Hopefully, you can break down that framework a little bit.
Yeah, and let's just pull in one more just for fun of our biases. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's named
Right.
after two psychologists who came up with it. And the Dunning-Kruger effect is about not knowing what you don't know. And my favorite example of this is second-year college students. When I do workshops on this topic, I sort of milk this one for the groans and the laughs in the audience, because we all know what a second year college student is like. First year college students loving being at college, great privilege to get higher education, and then your third and final year students are sort of, they've been humbled by the process just a little bit. But second year college students, they think they know everything. And they don't know how much they don't know about the topic they're talking about. And when they come across a real world expert, they don't pause. They just dive straight in with all the knowledge they've been given, because they think that having read 3 textbooks on the matter now makes them a world expert. And they don't know they're talking to maybe one of the authors of a textbook who just won a Nobel Prize. They don't care. And that's the problem that we've got. It's the unknown unknowns. So the things you don't know. So you need information. You can ask people to go and get that information for you, and you almost pause the decision until you've got the information. Great. Then there might be things that you say, well, I know there is information available, but we don't need to know it. So we know enough about our topic. So those are the unknown knowns, if you like. That's the weirdest part of this little matrix, is to say there is information, but we don't need it. We know enough about what's going on that we can ignore the information, even though we know it's available. But the bit that always trips us up is the things we don't know about the things we're talking about, the unknown unknowns. And that Dunning-Kruger effect is always there. And this just alerts us. And maybe we started with the confirmation bias, which is the most powerful instinct of your brain to prove itself right. Maybe this is a good place to land on it at the end of our conversation, because this is the biggest danger of not doing the work we've been talking about. The biggest danger is that you end up thinking that you know what you're talking about. You end up thinking that you're making a really good decision, and it turns out that there was a whole lot of stuff you weren't even aware of. And so some of the tools we've talked about, 5 whys and 6 thinking hats, some of the attitudes we've talked about. So going back to Adam Grant's book of the power of knowing what you don't know, and using that scientific method to test yourself about what you're thinking about. Dan Ariely's work on predictably irrational, reminding ourselves that we are not as logical as we think we are. So we need to look for where we've got gaps and made logical leaps that maybe we shouldn't have. And then going all the way back to that systems 1 and 2, giving ourselves a little bit of time, a little bit of space to make a better decision using some of these tools. If we do all of that, we are least likely to fall into the trap of realizing afterwards that we actually made quite a bad decision.
And like you said, it's having that mental agility, like Adam Grant talks about, to value our rethinking, embracing or overcoming cognitive entrenchment, and cultivating this kind of confident intellectual humility where we might be wrong. We need to change our perspective. Many people have to challenge the echo chambers they're in as well, I think, because many people have kind of been in those echo chambers for quite some time, and try to learn from that, and hopefully also learn from their setbacks, which I think is so critical as well. Before we end today, I just love for you to give kind of comments on where do you think this is moving forward in the future? We have AI that can make certain aspects of leadership more objective by providing data-driven insights, reducing some human biases. However, leadership is inherently a human endeavor that requires empathy, ethical judgment, and the ability to inspire and motivate people. So, where do you think this is moving, and how can we best leverage our HI and not just rely on AI?
Love that. Um, so I think this comes down to, what do you believe about the world that we live in at the moment? And if you believe that the world is maybe just going through a little blip of change, but ultimately, I don't know how long in the future, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, it'll stabilize back to where we were before. Then what you don't need sort of human intelligence in the system, because artificial intelligence has gathered for us all of human history's knowledge. And if the future is going to be the same as the past, then we can rely on algorithms and existing heuristics and systems to just say, well, if this has happened in the past and we've got 100 examples of it in the past and 90 of them ended up badly and 10 of them ended up well, well, then just let's obviously do the things that end up well. But if you believe in your heart and soul, and if you see evidence in front of your eyes, that we live at a remarkable moment in human history that seems to happen every few centuries, where deep structural changes are taking place in society, where we look around us and we say the systems as we see them are not working, but we don't despair in that statement. We just realize this is one of those moments of change and growth. It's like you're a teenager and you're going through puberty, and it's horrible to watch and it's horrible to experience, but an adult will emerge out the other side. But that adult is different from the child that went in. You can see what I think we are. I mean, I've got a much better story for that one than the everything's going to stay the same story. But I think that's where we are in human history. And in that environment, you're going to need leaders, you're going to need people at every level of society, teachers at schools, and people working on production lines in factories, who say, my task here is not simply to repeat what has always been done. It's not even just to optimize the existing system. My task here is to try and help a new system to emerge. And by new, I would also mean better, to try and help a better system emerge, to do something that humans haven't done before in human history. Sorry, Charles, I feel a little bit like I'm preaching, but it was a great question, and I'm passionate about this. I'm not just trying to help people make better decisions. I'm wanting people to use their human thinking skills to build a better world. That, for me, is why I do what I do, and helping people to think better and be more confident and competent in their thinking skills. I think it's essential.
Before we wrap up today, are there any other resources that listeners can go to learn more about common cognitive biases? We gave some great book recommendations. Like you said, Thinking Fast and Slow, it's somewhat outdated in some cases, and it's a really large, heavy book, both in terms of weight and in terms of trying to get through in a 1 or 2 or 3 or 20 or 30 sittings. Any other resources that you would direct them to learn more about this and become better, just hopefully decision makers?
Sure. So I know I'm repeating myself, but I cannot recommend Think Again by Adam Grant more highly than I have. So if you haven't read that, honestly, that's your starting point, without a doubt. If you've read it, read it again. But if you're already very familiar, I'll give you one more, and it's a slightly different one. It's by Jane McGonigal, and it's called Imaginable. It's a beautiful title. She wrote it during COVID. Now, Jane is a scenario planner. She and I work in similar spaces. We're both members of the Association of Professional Futurists. That's what we do for a living. And one of the bits of work she does, her particular role is gamification. She builds simulation games for governments and big corporates. And she did a simulation for a number of governments in about 2016 that simulated a global pandemic. And when they got to then obviously 2020 and COVID emerged, she then went back to try and track some of her clients who had used her simulation, and discovered that companies and governments who had engaged well with her simulation seemed to respond to COVID better than companies and governments that hadn't. And her argument was that everybody was sitting in 2020 when COVID hit us going, this is unimaginable, a global pandemic, unimaginable. And her argument is, no, on the contrary, it is entirely imaginable. And beautiful title of a book. And it's not about COVID, and it's not about the COVID response. That's not the point of the book. It's just the starting point. And she goes in to then provide the types of skills. And it's very much from a scenario, simulation, what-if thinking perspective. So if that sounds interesting, Jane McGonigal, Imaginable, also a wonderfully written book.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Dr. Codrington, for sharing your valuable insights with us today. Remind our listeners how they can learn more about your work and get in contact with you.
Sure. The best place is just my website. It's originally a Scottish and English name, so graemecodrington.com, but you'll pick up the name in the show notes and the title of the podcast. Just add a .com and you'll find out everything that I do and all the work that I do and the books that I've written and LinkedIn. Follow me on all the social media platforms. I put out regular posts and videos that I hope people find helpful as they try and think about the future and how they engage with it.
I hope this episode has provided you with valuable insights. If it has, I ask you to share it with someone who would also benefit from it. If you've been enjoying and gaining knowledge from this podcast, then subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can find all the previous episodes of the podcast and additional learning resources. You can also subscribe to the podcast on Apple or Spotify and leave up to a 5-star review.